In the second half of this topic, we're going to shift our attention from learning to memory. Now, like a lot of things in psychology, memory is something that we all know about, we're all familiar with it, we use it, we talk about it, and yet, like a lot of things, we might not really actually understand it. In psychology, we're going to learn how it works, we're going to define it, we're going to mess around with it a bit, and by the end you should have a much deeper understanding of what memory actually means. I love this quote here: "Memory is the essential feature of life. Without memory, we would be nothing." Because think about it, your memory is your internal record of all of your experiences, of who you are. And that's why it's so sad when people lose their memories, sometimes through illness and old age. When someone loses their memory, they lose themselves, which is why it's so heartbreaking. So with that in mind, what actually is memory? Well, the first thing to understand is that memory is not just one thing. There's no single location in the brain where we say, oh, that's your memory, that's it. When we talk about memory, we're actually talking about several memory systems, interconnected systems that work in coordination. It's also worth noting that we don't remember everything. We receive far too much sensory data. If you think about just right now, you're hearing my voice, you're seeing my image, you've got text on the screen. You are being bombarded with sensory information. And if you took all of that in and stored it, that would be highly inefficient and your brain would get overloaded really fast. So our memory is selective. We don't remember everything. We also don't remember things perfectly. We can make mistakes, and we can make mistakes at various different stages of the memory process. We've all remembered the wrong thing, thought we knew something and didn't know it, maybe on a sack. But we will learn a bit more about why that happens. How do we store memories and retrieve memories incorrectly? And that's really fascinating. The last thing I want to mention here is when we talk about someone losing their memory, like before I was saying about that heartbreaking thing where sometimes people completely lose their ability to remember. What we're talking about when someone loses their memory is some kind of malfunction in one or more memory systems. So going forward now, we're going to talk about those different memory systems, and we're going to see there's different stages of the memory process. And when something goes wrong, it can lead to us being unable to remember something. So there's a few little things to tease you, a few things coming up as we learn about memory. Gives a bit of an overview of what we're going to learn about. But what actually is memory? Well, fortunately for us, our textbook has a very clear, nice definition. Human memory is often defined as the processing, storage, and retrieval of information acquired through learning. Now, we've just gone through a topic on learning, and we learned that learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs due to experience. As we go through experiences, we retain information. We learn and we store information from those experiences. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about learning. When we talk about memory. That's how learning and memory go hand in hand and fit together. And so we've got these three terms here: processing, storage, and retrieval. This first one, processing, we'll often call that encoding, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. So let's say I've got this picture and I'm an artist and I want to have a really clear image in my mind of the Mona Lisa. I want to be able to close my eyes and picture it perfectly. In other words, I want to remember what this image looks like. Well, I need to go through these three stages of processing, storage, and retrieval. Processing would involve looking at the image, looking really closely at the image, noticing the details, and creating in my mind a mental image of the Mona Lisa. That would be me processing it. But it's not enough to just process it, because I might go away, eat a sandwich, and then it's completely gone. I need to store that information. I need to form a neural circuit in my brain with that information. We learned about neural basis of learning. It's the same process where our our neurons rewire to encode and store a memory. So that's the next part of the process. I need to actually retain it somewhere in my brain. But even that wouldn't be enough. I've looked at it, I've processed it, I've saved the image somewhere in my brain, I've retained it. But if I can't then retrieve that information, if I can't close my eyes and bring that information to mind and picture it almost perfectly, then I haven't actually remembered it because it's locked somewhere in my brain. I actually need to be able to bring that information back in order to say I have remembered it. So that's the three parts: processing, storage, retrieval, or as I said, encoding, storage, and retrieval. Let me give you one more analogy that might help you understand this idea of encoding, storage, and retrieval. Let's say I want to remember some information, some verbal information. Let's say song lyrics. I want to remember some song lyrics. Well, to encode or process the song lyrics would involve actually, in this case, encoding it would involve writing it down. I would need to get that information and put it onto a piece of paper. And as I form the words and write it, I'm encoding it, right? I'm forming a code by writing. The next step is I need to store it somewhere. So that would involve, in this case, taking that piece of paper where I've encoded the information, I've got it written down, and putting it into this filing cabinet. It's then stored, and 10 years later, it will still be stored and saved in that filing cabinet. And the last stage is retrieval. 10 years from now, I go, I had an idea for a song. I need to be able to go back to my filing cabinet, locate it. I've got you can see little letters here. So I need to know where it is stored. I need to be able to find the right file and pull out that piece of paper, and then I can read those lyrics again. So you can see encoding, storage, retrieval, that sort of analogy of a filing cabinet, or sometimes people use a computer, can be helpful for getting us to understand those three terms: encoding, storage, retrieval, the three essential processes in memory. Now, that's hopefully given you a good taste of the definition, a good introduction to the definition of memory and the core process of memory. In some upcoming lessons, we're going to go much deeper and learn a lot more about this fascinating topic. I look forward to learning more with you then.